Hello and welcome to Columbus Local Podcast. I'm Linda D'Amico and this is episode number 86. Tonight it is my great pleasure to have Linda Dachtyl. Linda, how are you?
Well, I'm fine, Len. Thanks for inviting me on the show.
Oh my gosh, I'm really glad you guys were able to come here together. Carrie's here as well. We're going to, yes, folks, we are going to have a Carrie Dachtyl episode that'll probably be in December of 2024 or so, somewhere around there. But today we're going to focus on Linda Dachtyl. Linda, you know, your name is big in Columbus, Ohio, with music. There's so much that you've done. And I'm sure there's a lot of folks like myself that are interested in the person behind the name. And when we see your performances, it's just a wonderful experience. I'd like to hear from your words how you describe yourself as part of the music community in Columbus, Ohio.
Well, thanks. I've always been pretty eclectic in my tastes and my interests. I would say that probably most people know me as a jazz organist. And then I also am a drummer. I play with the Roxy Janes. That's a nice group. With Kay Harris, Gayla Smith, Molly Palkin, and Mary Huff. And then, my jazz organ things with Carrie on drums and Don Hales on guitar. That's the core of the group with Mark Donovan on sax. Now, those are the working groups. But, as far as, my interest in progressive rock, this has been pretty much a lifetime thing. And, that's, kind of what we're focused on tonight, more of that with the release of the Waves of Change CD. But, that's been a labor of love kind of thing for me, probably ever since I decided to even study music seriously as a middle school person. And
so you've had your eye on this type of a project, this type of a release,
yes,
your whole life, and here it is.
Yeah, pretty much, and a lot of false starts, and the thing is that I first heard this music when my parents were playing cards with another couple, and there was an older, they had a daughter who was a little bit older that kind of had to put up with not quite babysitting us, but she had a new stereo, and she was showing me her records, and I said, well, I've seen this one here, and, well, you want to listen to it? It was Yes is Fragile.
Oh, geez.
And so she put that on, and, the thing is, it's like, yeah, I heard a couple songs on the radio, and it was like I was just sitting there intrigued, and she started apologizing for, well, I'm sorry, these songs are so long. I said, oh, no. I said, it's fine. And that was really kind of the catalyst for the whole thing, was just that, little perchance thing that happened where she played that record album.
And what an album to get indoctrinated, or at least baptized into progressive rock. That's one of my favorite all-time albums.
Yeah, it's still one of mine too.
Man, that's cool. That's a cool story.
So I mean, that's kind of how that started.
Mm-hmm.
And then, with that album, I right away I said to my folks, I said, oh, can you buy this for me? And so, I sat there and I read the liner notes and
the artwork too, man.
Right.
Wow, the mind just goes. It
and
really does, listening to that stuff.
Well, a music teacher, I went in and I said, I don't know what these things are, that Rick Wakeman was playing. I said, I don't know what a moog is, and which is the wrong pronunciation, moog. I mean, I've heard different things. And he gave me a Switched on Bach album to listen to. He said, well, if you really want to know about that synthesizer, he gave me his record album to listen to. So, it was just little things really kind of far apart from each other, but that's really where it started.
That's really cool. Really cool. And for Waves of Change, then, it's been incubating all these years, the concept. And this is your latest.
Yes, it is.
Works. When did you, I know you started, with that, but like when did it actually start to come together and regard to material and then assembling the process of the production. I know that's going to be a long story probably, because this is quite a body of work.
Well, thank you.
And it's okay, right? You can use as much time as you want.
Okay, well, basically, around I got on the internet in 1996, and the first two things that I looked for were people that had interest in progressive rock and jazz organ. And I found those right away. And also I wanted to put together a group in that, and it was nice to find people that had interest. Now, at that time, I didn't put a group together yet, but I started to think about, well, how would I do this? And I went back to listen to Yes, of course, but very early stuff. I noticed that Yes had reworked a lot of covers before they were ever famous, like West Side Story Tonight. There were a couple of pieces on their first two albums, like they seemed to like to cover, Crosby, Stills, and Nash, or whatever. There was Stephen Stills thing, and then Vanilla Fudge were doing the same thing, which is a group I discovered way after the fact. I mean, reworked covers, and the other was very early versions of Deep Purple, before even Ian Gillan and Roger Glover were in the band. They'd cover things like Hey Joe, but it'd be like a 10-minute epic kind of thing. And I thought, well, I want to start with that. And so I started working with some covers and kind of trying to overblow them, so to speak, because original music is a difficult thing, and I've always thought as a marketing thing, and it's very sincere. It's not a ploy, but let me take some works that are just let me see what I can do with arrangements with them, in addition to original music, and that's kind of how it started. And I put together a band in '99 called Logarithm, and my front person at that time, Kevin Ryan, who I taught with at Bishop Hartley High School, he came up with that, it was a play on the mathematic thing, and we misspelled it on purpose.
That's cool.
Yep. And that band lasted about 2 years, and it was just, they're very high maintenance band, and it's not a personality thing, it's just the music. You just have to just work, and work and work and work. And so when that project, went away, I just went on and did other things for several years. And then thought about it probably to try something again. I'm trying to think about what year that would have been, maybe 2012 or 13, and, started to put that back together with all different people. And that group had that was called E-Skip, and that had a shelf life of maybe 4 years that was basically concluded when Dave Williams died suddenly of a heart attack. And I just decided enough of that. And so I shelved that. Yeah, Dave was a really great guy, and he was one of the main writers in that particular band. And so, just let that lay dormant, and then when the lockdowns, in 2020 happened, it's like, well, I've got all this time on my hands. And so that's when I started to take a look at some of the older things that we had done, like the Beatles being for the benefit of Mr. Kite was from the Logarithm days from '99. And let's see, there was 2 covers on there that I could never convince anybody to play. Okay, and one of them was that Spanky and Our Gang Like to Get to Know You, and the other one was Some Velvet Morning, which my version of it is kind of taking Vanilla Fudge and the Nancy Sinatra, Lee Hazelwood, and putting my own spin on it too. But, I never could get anybody interested in doing either one of those tunes in those groups, prior.
Right.
And then I picked up the 4th cover just because I wanted to do something that was historic concerning the Mellotron. That's Graham Bond's Baby, You Know It's True. A very pretty song, too. And I'm surprised that I couldn't find any covers of it except for some Danish group on a TV show from the 70s. And, so that was my choice for the covers, to something familiar. That one's more of a historic thing for the Mellotron. And, and then the other compositions, I'm trying to think. Waves of Change was one that was in kind of a working thing. We had recorded a significant demo of it and decided to keep the drum and bass tracks and my keyboard tracks from that time. And then, let's see, Rising Sun was one that I finished during the pandemic. And let's see, what else here? Oh, Redemption was just a short piece that, had been kind of in a, it had been in some kind of state with the E-Skip band, but it really wasn't quite finished. And then the Turmoils of the Soul goes all the way back to when I was in grad school. It was originally an instrumental piece, and then I decided, well, it needs to be a vocal piece. And that's one of the things where I really stretched myself on stuff. Was I've never been much of a lyricist, and I just decided that it's like, well, I'm just going to do it. I tried some co-writing things with different people, and we got some nice things, but we never quite gelled, so I just decided to DIY on this, or however you say it. Do it yourself, DIY.
And you wrote the lyrics?
Yeah, I did. I did, and that was for me to write music. I don't want to say it's easy, but that's a lot easier for me. Lyrics, for me, and you find out too, after you've written the lyrics, are they actually singable? I'm just talking more from a, certain vowels, certain consonants. It's like, those are kind of things that you don't even think about. And I don't know if, people really do think about it, but it's like, well, I probably should change this word here because it's not working out, it's not sounding right, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't really have a method for that, but, the music part of it, that came a lot easier for me.
How does that come for you, though?
Well, generally, it's kind of a thing where I really like chords and harmony. So I'll sit around on the piano or the guitar, mostly the piano or, synths, and come up with a nice chord progression and record it. And if that's all I get, like maybe 4 or 8 bars, just document it and come back to it later. And, just keep building on top of that. I don't really have a method for it. But, what I found is that I can, just take these little snippets, and then that's where my music education comes in. I'm very schooled. I have a master's degree in music, but that doesn't mean anything unless you can play, or create. That's where I'm at.
And assemble and arrange, right?
Exactly, and that's where it's very helpful.
Compose.
Yeah, for me, it's like, I always say this, and I've taught at the college level too, and, I don't know if people like this or not, but I learned equally from the ivory tower and the garage. Because, I learned a lot of things from musicians that, if I even put a chord sheet in front of them, they'd be like, well, I really don't read music, but, they might play something on the guitar, and it's like, well, can you tell me what that chord is? I remember, for instance, years ago when I was playing in a cover band, let's see, who was in that group? Okay, well, most of those people moved out of town and they aren't playing anymore. But anyway, the guy was like playing that Stormy Monday riff on the guitar like the Allman Brothers, and it was like, ooh, I really like that sound. I said, can you tell me what you're playing there? He says, well, I really don't know. I got this, and he showed me the chord shape, and then I, tried to grab the notes on the piano. Yeah, just stuff like that, and, I've sure milked that riff for years. So it's been that way, like if I didn't understand something. And, I just I learned from profs, I learned from the garage. I mean, and I think it all,
It's all
what's,
experiences that blend
that's right. And they all are
and move
meaningful.
you for their waves, right?
Exactly. There you go.
That's kind of how it strikes, the name of your work, Waves of Change. So you had the music first, and you ended up you wrote the lyrics to the songs.
Right. Well, here's the process that I used. Okay. And this goes back to when I did my second organ album with Tony Monaco, producing, okay, and engineering. He said, Linda, you play drums too. He said, that'd be something, he said, I don't know how we would do that. And so I kind of made a note of that. That was about 2008. And when I ended up recording the one 2015, a late one, was like, I think I know how to do this now. And I decided to do a tribute to Cozy Cole, Topsy. I knew Cozy. I went to Capital University, and he was actually a student there. He wanted to legitimately get a degree. And one of the weird things was sitting there in jazz history class beside Cozy Cole, who actually was jazz history. So he was sitting there taking the class. Von Weister was the instructor of that. But, he came and took all the tests, and he was just a wonderful guy. So I thought, well, if I'm going to do a drum piece, I like sing, the Benny Goodman thing, but I thought, yeah, that really isn't what. So Topsy, I decided to, take a look at the old recordings that Cozy had done. And then basically what I did was I transcribed it, and that took quite a while. Just orally doing that probably took a couple of weeks of me, messing with it a couple hours a day. And then I sequenced it into Finale as I was writing the parts. And then what we ended up doing was I took those horrible sounding MIDI files, fed them downstairs to our studio to Carrie, and Carrie and I sat there and laid the drum tracks first, erased the crappy thing, and then just had the musicians come in one by one. I did my organ parts next, and then Don the guitar, and then we brought the horns all in.
This is at your home studio?
My home studio, yeah. Pterodactyl Productions, and Carrie's had everything in there from a big band to a cello quartet that wanted to get gigs for wedding receptions, know. And Teenie Tucker has recorded there a number of times. I think 3 of her releases, maybe 4. Our
5 Carrie sang.
5, okay. So yeah, I can't keep track of that, all that stuff, and just different things. But anyway, so we built that Topsy track up in that regard, and it has relevance for the new CD because that's how I did everything. Okay, it's like, with the exception as far as the musicians on this, it's kind of Charles Valentino sings all the lead vocals. Carrie plays drums or orchestral percussion or marimba on most of them. I play drums on 3 of them, and I did all the keyboard work, some atmospheric guitar, and let's see what else. The background vocals. I did a couple of lead lines on some of the things on the singing, which was kind of a new thing for me too. And then the rest of the group is people from Honk, Wail, and Moan. Larry Marotta on guitar, and Steve Parakis on bass, and then Mark Donovan on tenor sax. I just have one tune on there with horn. And, I just basically what I did, since they all read, okay, I had put this together on the sequencer, and I had to write out parts. I wrote everything out on Finale, and then it's like, okay, we're going to do this tune. And then, Carrie and Steve and I did some bed tracks, just to get the bass and drums down for a couple of them. But some of them just went, I just sent them downstairs from my computer to Carrie's, and we did the drums first, erased the crappy drum machine thing I had on there, and just built it up from that. And I actually learned how to do that from having done that Topsy thing. That's why I mentioned the Topsy story, because
Nice.
that's how I learned how to do that. And frankly, it's a really great way to do things, even though it's tedious. But I didn't have to rehearse a band for, 6 months to a year to do stuff like this, which, that might take that, just, with people only being available maybe once or twice a week. And,
Right.
And it's like, hey, here's the sheet music, and here's your payment for this, work for hire. And, it just went by, much smoother than me trying to do this starting with a band. Although, the band thing, if we could all live together in a firehouse and this kind of thing, maybe that could, like Yes
Over
did
the
or
winter,
whatever.
making stew. Yeah.
Exactly, but that's
fun.
kind of not the way it works now. So
No, but it's interesting how that came about for you. And you mentioned Charles Valentino.
yes, yeah. Well, he was a find. He
How do you come? Yeah. And you chose him to sing this album, every track, right?
yes, he's all lead on that, and well, the thing is that was the last thing that I did. Okay, who am I going to get to sing? I got all the musicians, and Carrie was involved with a Jesus Christ Superstar thing that Stacey Anagnostis and Rob put together, and I wasn't involved in that. But I was upstairs listening to the rehearsals, and I thought, well, who's singing Judas's parts down there? Who is that guy? And it was like,
In your own house.
that's right.
I know, man.
Yeah, he was up there just screaming like Ian Gillan, and it was like, okay, well, I just made a mental note of it. And then, Charles agreed to do it, and it turned out very well.
It did. I've heard several of these tracks, and it's just really, there's a couple of emotional, hitting male singers that affect me that way. Pavarotti's one of them, and Charles Valentino is another one of those, because he can actually make me, emotional with his performance. He has that thing that gave you pause to make the mental note.
Well,
He does.
one of the things, and Pete Fallico from San Jose, he's a NPR DJ out there, and he runs the Doodlin' Lounge, which that goes all the way back to when I signed on the internet, because I've known Pete that long. Pete did a very nice webpage on Hank Marr, B3 legend here from Columbus, and I studied with him, and that's how I got in touch with Pete. But Pete, in the liner notes, he did talk about you need to let your emotions sweep you away with this music, and he compared it some to like theater and those kinds of things. And so Pete picked up on that, totally being apart from anything in the process. Pete's known me for years, and Tony Monaco also, who Tony, I was so happy when Tony agreed to have this on the album, because mostly his Chicken Coop Records is more of a jazz organ label, although he's had some other people on there that were a little more into fusion, so that was probably a little bit of a stretch. But it was no problem, and I'm glad, because I didn't have to shop labels that I didn't know. So
Yeah, for sure. the rest of the players that you have that recorded on Waves of Change, have you known them over the years? How have they intertwined with your association?
okay, well, I'm married to Carrie.
Yep.
There's one there.
He's over there shaking his head like big deal. It's a big deal, man. It
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, well, yeah, we.
Peter asked twice.
But you know what? As far as other than Charles, okay, because Charles is newer in my friend circle, but Steve Parakis, Larry Marotta, and Mark Donovan,
Those are
I've
some big names.
played
in
with them
Columbus.
in Honk, Wail, and Moan, and Mark plays in my quartet, plays tenor and different woodwinds in the organ group. So that's a long period of time. Steve, I met when I was in grad school at Ohio State, but we didn't really work together then. But we just kind of knew each other. And then, I met Larry and Mark later. But, Steve asked me to join Honk, Wail, and Moan. I'm trying to think what year that was. Well, I got pictures of me wearing a kimono playing the Hammond B3 down at Confest. I would say probably early 2000s. I know that group's been around since, I think 91 is what Steve said. And, there's been heartache in that band. I mean, we lost our main writer, Brian Casey, in 2008. He was a delightful guy and very creative. And I didn't know, I think, is it Mark Henderson? I did not know him, but, he was one of the alums of Honk, Wail, and Moan that passed, too. And the group's active, and that's always fun. It's, it just is. And, that's how I got to know, Steve and Larry mostly, and then Mark, just different things. I mean, we had worked, some musical theater, pit orchestra kind of things locally here, and, it's just it's a big network, There's a lot of people here in town that I don't know, but, most of the times, it's what's that funny saying about, you're 5 people away from knowing everybody.
Word of mouth. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And you work with some great musicians
Yeah, I've had
on a regular basis.
some of the, I'd say, as far as my college teachers. I mean, I certainly need to recognize them. Bob Breithaupt from Capital University. Jim Curlis, I studied with at Ohio State, talking on the drum thing. Dr. James L. Moore, late Dr. Moore. Dave Wheeler, where I learned pretty much how to orchestrate. He was kind of the jazz ed guru here in town forever. Hank Marr, some other names, but I'm not sure where I was going with that, but. What, honey? Gene Walker, yes, Gene Walker. Yeah, I certainly don't want to forget Gene, and that's just thinking on the top of my head. But Gene, I worked with Gene, well, pretty much from '04 until he passed. I mean, Gene did not play maybe most of the last year that he lived, but I basically got to know Gene. I mean, Tony Monaco had mentioned that, but what really happened was when Hank Marr died in '04, I was approached by Dan Thomas, who used to work quite a bit on the committee of Hot Times, okay? And he's a very gregarious fella, and he used to do some radio announcing work, I think WCRS, I'm not sure. But anyway, Dan heard me play probably with Honk, Wail, and Moan at Comfest, and he says, well, Hank's gone, and he's like, we need somebody to take over that jam. And I said, well, wait a minute. I said, for Hank Marr? And he's like, yeah. He said, you can do that and whatever. And I'm like, I really had only been playing the organ in that context for probably about 4 years. I mean, I took organ lessons since I was a kid, but that was more playing, I don't know what you'd say, theater organ style or more supper club. It wasn't jazz, and I kind of dug into that in the late 90s. But, at that point, it had only been 4 or 5 years. And Gene, I knew Gene. I had played a gig or two with him as a drummer. It's funny because we concurrently were students at Ohio State together. Gene went back to get his bachelor's degree.
Yeah.
But, I think Gene thought, well, who's this kid, wanting to horn in on this thing at first. But it was a thing where, when we got together, he said to me, he said, why do you want to play, Linda? And I said, all the things you are. And he said, after we played the tune, he said, I know, how did he put it? He said, I'm glad you called that tune, because he said, I use that tune to cut people off the bandstand at jams. And, but all in, friendly and stuff. And,
Right.
But it was kind of a thing where it's like, Dan really put us together. But then, it ended up being a very, very nice work relationship for, for almost 10 years. And it was nice from the beginning, but, I think Gene didn't know if I could play or not, was basically what it was. And, here it is, trying to step in, for Hank Marr. I mean, I was actually like, I don't know if I can do this, but it ended up being very fruitful and very satisfying.
And where was that?
That was the Hot Times Jam.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's like, I think that, I don't know the total history, but I think that Hank and Rusty Bryant maybe started that. And I remember, going to the Anchor Inn jams that Rusty and Hank ran back in the, it was probably the early 80s was when that started. Kind of date myself on that, I guess, by saying that. But anyway, a bunch of us college kids, we'd go out there, and Hank would always let us play. And, that was the point of it, actually. And I think Rusty and Hank started that. Now, if that's not true, I'm sure I'll be corrected. And then Gene got involved with it. And then, and then that went on for years with Hank and Gene running it. And then when Hank passed, then, I came in, and played organ for that. And
for how long did that last for you?
Okay, let's see here. Not quite 10 years.
That's
yeah.
longevity.
Yeah, not quite 10 years. And it was always very enjoyable. And I know when Gene died, they asked me if I wanted to take it over. I said no. I mean, I just thought, that I wanted to leave that alone. Now, I know that they do have something going on with that, but I just kind of felt like, after Gene passed, that I just kind of wanted to do something else,
What did that end up being for you?
What do you mean?
Then moving on, where'd you move into from there?
Okay, well,
like generally.
Well, Gene passed in 2014, so
Yeah.
so basically, well, this actually leads to something else. Okay, Gene was very popular here in town and all over. I mean, he played with every organ player except Jimmy Smith, and he used to tell me that when Jimmy Smith would come to town, he liked his mother's cooking so much that Jimmy'd come over to the house and have dinner. But I don't know why they never played together, but he played with McGriff and all these big names. I could, just a laundry list of names of jazz organists.
Nice.
But see, where was I going with that? Oh yeah, okay. So anyway, when Gene died, there was a regular church service and such, but they put together a memorial show for him at the Lincoln. Okay. And, it's kind of a thing that, I figured that, everybody and their brother would want to play it. And I remember talking to one of the organizers. I said, look, I'd like to do something, but, if there isn't room, that's okay too. I mean, Gene was a friend, and it was like, it was just a thing where it's like, if there's room for us to play, that's fine. And if there's not, I won't be offended. Okay. Right. So anyway, Ted McDaniel put us, Carrie and me, together with Don Hales. Okay. And I had known Don, but not well. He had played with Tony Monaco for years. And Don's got a resume like you wouldn't believe. I mean, every everybody from Bill Doggett of the Honky Tonk fame to Eddie Harris and so on and so forth. But they decided to put Don on with us, and we played All the Things You Are, just because of the significance with Gene and my history on that. And we did not have a sax player. I said, I want a sax player, not for that. And that's how that started. And so then, Don and Carrie and I, basically have been, doing this since, for 10, well, where are we at? 2024, 10 years. And, still going. We're playing the Italian Festival on Friday.
That's right. I thought I saw that name.
Yeah. So, and with Mark Donovan on sax and Don and Carrie and I, 5:30 up there. But, when it depends whenever you listen to this podcast, but that's current right now.
Yeah,
so,
from today.
Yeah.
That's quite an array of influences in Columbus. Have you always been in Columbus, Linda?
No, I grew up in Holmes County, which is in the middle of Amish country. I actually grew up outside of a little town called Berlin, Ohio, not Berlin. I guess they changed the pronunciation during the First World War or whatever. Little place called Bunker Hill Village.
Wow.
And my father passed in 2020, and my mother's doing well. But they ran a cheese business up there. Dad was an immigrant from Bern, Switzerland, outside of Bern. Came over here as a young child with his parents and sister, and they were involved in the cheese business, and they still are. And so I grew up there, kind of in the middle of nowhere, and just had interest in music and stuff. And then I came to college, Capital University, and I pretty much stayed. I did live out in the Dayton area, with my first teaching job, but I decided to come back here and go to grad school. And I've always liked Columbus. I mean, I think we have a pretty good thing happening here with the music, particularly in the jazz and original and whatever. I mean, I've never been hurting for work.
No, you haven't, and your name's everywhere. What are some of the ones that kind of highlight in your mind over, the time where you've been asked to perform in maybe an event that we may not have known was you?
Well, I'd have to give that some thought. Let me think about that for a
That's okay.
second.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, that's all right. Oh, I don't know. You mean like
You ever
special
play,
things?
You ever play at a ball game? You ever play organ at at an event? A church or anything like that?
Yeah, I've done some of that. As far as significant events, probably one of the ones that will always stand out to me, and this is on the jazz organ side of things,
Sure.
is I was introduced to Trudy Pitts from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and she was one of the legendary B3 players. I mean, playing the B3 is it's kind of like this whole community of people like all the bassoon players in the United States. I mean, people know each other in the
Right.
circles. Some of the names may not be as familiar if you're not particularly into jazz and then in the organ stuff. But I was introduced to Trudy Pitts by a woman in Florida named Joan Cartwright, and she did podcast interviews. And she decided to do one on female organist, and she asked me, would you like to be on this with Trudy Pitts? And I'm like, wait a minute. It was shocking, actually. And I remember telling Joan, I said, if Trudy and I hit it off, I said, I'd like to maybe try to put together something playing with her. Like they call them jazz organ summits, and it's basically, it's not like a boxing match kind of deal, but it's like you have a concert, and then you don't compete against each other, but it's kind of a thing, where there's a lot of organ music going on. And what happened was, Trudy and I really hit it off, and we got to be good friends. I mean, and it wasn't me being the fangirl. Oh, I'm talking to Trudy, and la la.
But you
la.
kind of were, right?
Yeah, I
Kinda?
was, but we got to know each other,
That's so awesome.
Yeah, and it was. And then I told Gene Walker about this. I said, keep this under wraps. I said, Trudy and I mean, not that I was friends with Trudy, but we've been talking about maybe trying to do something together.
Nice.
And he said, okay, fine. So he kind of filed that back. He talked to Dr. Ted McDaniel at Ohio State, who I knew Ted, and a great guy, very supportive. And Gene said, well, something, why don't we bring Gloria Coleman on here? Because Gene had lived with Gloria Coleman, who's a jazz organist. She's deceased too now. But let's see here. And George Coleman, who's still living, tenor saxophone player. I think he's up in his 90s. Okay. So anyway, they decided between Gene and Ted kind of, putting their thoughts together, I was going to be on it, Trudy, and they brought Gloria Coleman. And I would say that was probably to this point, probably one of the highlights, because, those two women really, I mean, everybody, if people don't know about jazz organ, but they might know a little bit, Jimmy Smith's name will come up. Well, these people were Jimmy Smith type, of fame and respect.
Recognized.
Yeah, so I was kind of thrown in with that. Well, and the friendship I had with Trudy always meant an awful lot, because she would just call me out of the blue. It wasn't like, oh, Trudy, can you teach me how you did this run or whatever. I mean, and she would welcome that too, but it was really a genuine thing.
Sounds like it.
It was, and very much so. And we had August birthdays. Mine's the 8th, and hers was the 10th. And we used to tease each other about that. And I came home, on, one of my birthdays, and there's Trudy Pitts on my phone machine having, sung happy birthday to me. Just stuff like that. And she was
cool.
very spiritual too, and, a devout Christian, and, just a real person, very much so.
Sounds like it. And, with those experiences too, with jazz organ, are there works that are recorded with that? Is your
with Trudy and Gloria? Yeah, some, and I'm glad that to have this video. On my YouTube channel, which is LDB3 Music, somebody did a tape. I mean, it's very homegrown, but that whole show is documented.
Oh, wow.
And what I did was I went through, instead of like putting this 2-hour thing up, which nobody will watch, was I took the, some people would, but I separated all the songs, so it's like, however many tunes I had, mine and Trudy's and Gloria's all separated out. And so it is there. There's enough documentation. And, it's a 2009 quality video, which was fine.
But you're fortunate to have it.
For sure.
Yeah, definitely. No doubt about it. So with B3, though, how did that enter your life?
Okay.
And what is B3, for those that may not know?
Well, it's like calling a Les Paul, or, it's a brand kind of thing. But let's see, the B3 stuff, I'm trying to think. Well, basically, the organ stuff started. My dad encouraged me to take lessons, and I was about 6, and this Sears truck came to the house. I'm like, ooh, what's that? well, there's something in there for you. And it's like, oh, okay. And
How cool is that?
yeah, well, I had not even asked, but I think, Dad, knowing that I was kind of a squirrely kid, I should probably, focus something instead of, just running around the house. And so I learned on that organ. It was a full organ. It was small, but it had pedals. It wasn't like a little chord organ. And then I took lessons with a couple of brothers in Dover, Ohio that ran a Lowry dealership. So I had a Lowry for the next organ. And then I really liked the Hammond, and I said, well, what about the Hammond? And it was like, well, you have this other organ here, but let's see if we can sell it. So they sold that organ. I think another $600 bought me my first Hammond. And it didn't have all the bells and whistles. I mean, that Lowry had like some drums on it. They didn't have drum machines yet. You had to actually keep time. You'd like put a bass drum on the pedal, boom, boom, and then the snare drum be on the the left hand, and so but B3. I mean, the Hammond thing. I mean, that's the sound, and
The organ.
right, and that organ I have was from. This is just the quality of the instrument, and the reason why Hammond organ probably went out of business. Okay, the original company. All right, because they never break down. The B2 organ that I have a B3 also, but B2 precedes that. Let me see here. 1951, it was dated that way by one of my techs. And just 2 years ago, the power amp went down.
Oh.
And I sent...
The original?
The original. I sent it up to Detroit. My tech, John Doyle, I sent it up to him. And yeah, it was nice. We could take it out, and I didn't have to drive the organ up to Detroit. And I said, I want to know if there was any work done. And he said everything was original. So that thing lasted for 70 years. And
What a great story.
Yeah, isn't it, though? But they never needed to be replaced.
No.
And,
Tanks.
exactly. And
you hauled that around Columbus.
right.
Right?
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I'm an endorsee of the Hammond XK3C, and that's the newer Hammonds. That's a digital, and they're very, very nice instruments. But it goes into about 5 pieces. It's manageable. The other one, you got to have a van. You just have to do it.
Forklift?
Well,
How did you guys move that around?
dollies and a ramp. I mean, it's doable with a couple of people. So I need to take a drink of water here.
Oh, sure. No problem. Yeah, it's no problem. Yeah, and I think what we'll do, too, is we'll have some links to some of your music that we'll put in the episode. Mm-hmm. And just make sure that we have, access to your music.
Okay, here we are.
Yeah. How can we find your music?
Okay, our website is www.dachtyl.com. Okay, now all of my I've run out of some CDs on earlier releases, but that's where we can get the Waves of Change CD and also a late one. Now, as far as people that don't own these archaic CD players, all right, I'm on all the regular things, your iTunes, Amazon, whatever, Spotify, it's out there. The only thing about Spotify on the new one, well, I don't have a full subscription, so maybe full subscribers,
We're able to get right to it.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
That is a rub with the subscriptions.
Yeah, and the other thing too is that the suite, that's a 16-minute suite. There's separation on the tracks in Spotify where if you buy the CD, it all melts together, right? So that was the only thing, because I have pointed people to Spotify and YouTube and that kind of thing, for people to listen to stuff. But I got plenty of CDs I'd love to sell.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
And how many releases do you have? How many full CD releases do you have?
Okay, I have 3 jazz organ ones, and then this one in the progressive rock vein. We are coming out with 2025, another jazz organ one.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, so we just finished recording that one within the last couple of weeks.
So jazz organ, but Waves of Change is really the culmination of ever since you were young.
Yes, very
The
much
thoughts
so.
and arrangements coming into Waves of Change as a release. What's that, Gary?
Amethyst, Linda.
The what?
Amethyst.
Oh, yeah, okay. There is another one, Amethyst Dreams, that I forgot about. Now, that was a collaboration between, that's year 2000. And that's really the first commercial release, New Age Celtic. And that was that's not me as a solo artist. That was a collaborative effort between me and Timothy Conway. Okay, and he did the basically I orchestrated his music. Okay, and he came in with a bunch of lyrics. He had he wrote a script, and it was based on Merlin the Magician, but it was a little bit more historic. Now, he hasn't gotten that staged yet, but in that collaboration that we did, we took 2 or 3 years during our leisure time in the late 90s, came up with a whole lot of music, and so we just decided to release an instrumental thing, and that was probably, I'm trying to think, well, that's a heavy synth album. Carrie played some percussion on there, but it's pretty much a synth album with a 90s, late 90s kind of sound, Amethyst Streams. But that's also on all the streaming things. I don't have any of those for sale, as far as hard copy.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yep. So we'll have links to your Spotify.
Sure.
And then to where we can get more information with your purchasing a CD.
Sounds good.
That'd be a good way to go.
All right. I need to write that down for you, or
We'll get it. We'll catch it afterward.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Anything else you want to leave us with in regard to thoughts and inspiration with your music, Linda?
Well, I just appreciate that people enjoy it. I mean, I would do it anyway. I feel that it's a calling, and I don't see any reason to ever stop. Just keep going and going and going from
Right.
one thing to the
Right,
other.
and you have a 2025. We'll keep our eyes and ears peeled for this new release too.
Yes, and that one.
And that's jazz. That's jazz.
Yeah,
organ
that's going to be
coming.
jazz organ. Now, as far as doing any more progressive rock, I kind of have a goal of maybe 3 to 4 years. Another thing too, it's like, you have to fund these things too, and so I noticed that a lot of time had gone by since 2015. Well, we lost 2 years, to the the lockdown
pandemic.
stuff
Yeah.
but I generally, to put something out every 2 to 3 years, I think is reasonable. So
It takes that long.
it does.
It can take even longer sometimes, and then again, people get themselves in those barn homes and hang out for a winter and crank it out.
There you go.
You think you might pull it off that way? No, it's not going to happen. is it?
Probably not. I mean,
It's too much, too close together. You could do that when you're in your 20s, but I don't know about where I am. I can't imagine living with some of my friends for that
Oh
long.
yeah, that part of it. Yeah, I don't know.
I love them, but ooh.
Yeah, definitely need to have.
Carrie's shaking his head now.
Yeah, well, we appreciate our little kitty cats. That they're the other people in our house.
Very cool. Anything live coming up, Linda,
Well,
with your involvements?
okay, the Italian festival. Okay, right now, for the rest of the year, it's jazz organ stuff. Well, no, that's not really true. Okay, I mean, okay, we're playing the Italian festival on October the 11th, and I have some calendar with the Roxy Janes. That's the band I play drums with. Those are all out in the Buckeye Lake area. Okay, and I keep my Facebook updated,
Okay,
on
cool.
that. And then we're going to finish out public performance. Anything can come up, but the first weekend of November, Dick's Den, I have a Charles Erland B3 tribute band, okay, that will be represented on the new CD on one number. That's a 6-piece group with Mark Donovan, Ben Hunt on tenor, Ben Huntoon on trumpet, Charles Erland alum Pat Ankrum on percussion, and then the core group of Carrie and me and Don Hales. And then the trio has one more date at Dick's Den. So that's what's coming up, and I keep things quite updated through social media on those things.
Great. So we just look your name, and we can find out what you're up to. It's great music.
Well, thank you so much.
Waves of Change is the latest progressive rock. We've got several releases that we'll have links to for your jazz organ and various releases there. Linda Dachtyl, thank you so much for sharing so much about some of the insights with your latest music and some of the inspirations and your experiences over the years here as a Columbus-based musician. That's definitely had so many wonderful contributions and performances and music production that we can all enjoy for a long time. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, Len.
You bet. All right, I think Carrie, he's had the spot that Beth usually hangs out. Beth's traveling on business this week, but how'd that work out for you over there, Mister?
Chair.
It's a comfortable chair.
Yeah, it is. I said I was expecting it to be hard, and I sunk in. I'm like, well, this will work.
Yep, it's pretty good. Not bad. Okay, guys, episode number 86, Linda Dachtyl. Thank you so much. Appreciate Linda's time and Carrie's time. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.